Hello, I'm Dan Brunton. Welcome to the ConneXion podcast series. Today we are joined by Mike Introna from MI Associates. Mike has a deep and knowledgeable experience of the corrugated industry, having worked at leading independent TRM packaging in the UK, as well as transferring across to DS Smith following the acquisition of the TRM business. And Mike's joining us to record a series of podcasts. And in the first episode today, we're going to be looking at some of the issues related to COVID and the impact it has on the corrugated industry. Mike, welcome. Thanks for joining us. And obviously high on the agenda at the moment for all businesses across the EU and further afield and into North America and Asia as well. We're all dealing with the dreaded COVID. It seems to be something that has obviously been, taking many of the headlines in the news for the last 7 months or so. But obviously we've got a very serious situation here, Mike, because, as a corrugated industry, we are seen as a critical supply chain partner. And many of the businesses are continuing to operate. Mike, tell us a little bit about some of the work that you're doing with some of the smaller and medium-sized independents within the UK corrugated industry, as they address some of the massive issues relating to staff and how they are dealing with members of their team who just can't turn up to work because they're having to self-isolate.
Okay. Hi, Dan. Good morning, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to everyone today. Yeah, it's tough at the moment, and we're in this second wave, and all things would seem to point to it's going to be even worse than what we experienced in the spring. It's a real challenge for people. I was only talking to one senior manager in a box plant last night who told me that they were 20% of their people down, and they were losing 5 people a day at the moment, and this was up in the northwest. So a real challenge for them. And you're then into how do they manage that with their key skills? Just as an example, they were talking about things like clamp truck drivers. They were down on people there, or it might be people like ink technicians or anybody that's a key skill in the business. And I think the advice that I gave that person was that, well, okay, when you're having your Zoom meeting tomorrow, and this person was self-isolating as well, as was a number of the management team, which is another challenge for businesses. When you're having your meeting, perhaps you need to just have that discussion around critical path analysis of your people and skills, and look at what you've got. There is the tendency to just say, well, let's just flog everybody to death in terms of overtime, but that's not necessarily the thing that's going to work, because if you just got everybody working 12-hour shifts, then the fatigue soon starts to set in too. This was a corrugating plant, integrated box plant. So one of the questions I asked was, well, if you've lost 20% of your people, and it's likely to be 25% by the end of the week, if you haven't got the capacity to manufacture the boxes, then do you need to try and strain your corrugator on 3 shifts? So maybe that's another way of looking at how you utilize your resources. The other problem you've got is people's worries and fears. And we talked a little around just making sure that you're communicating with all your staff as to what's happening, what the situation is with service and your customers. And similarly, you're doing that with your customers, because if you've lost 25% of your workforce, then you're going to have some service challenges. And the key thing that I've always found in the past is that if you're upfront with your customers, they'll respect that. They won't always like it if they're not going to get the delivery on time. But if you get the delivery there when you say it's going to be there, then that's a lot better than them constantly being on the phone wondering when the products are going to arrive. Similarly, with your employees, keep in touch with them. If someone's off, whether they've been on furlough or whether they're self-isolating and they're worried about what's happening at work, they're worried about their jobs, keep in touch with people, because that will go through your workforce and just help general morale if people think that they're being looked after and treated well. I think the other thing as an employer, you've got to make sure that it's easy to say that, but it takes time. You have a 10-minute conversation with 10 people, a week, then that's a couple of hours out of your week quite easily, and maybe even more with preparation. So make sure you're giving your managers the time to do that. Make sure that they're comfortable doing that, because not everybody is always so skilled in terms of managing some of the welfare issues and some of the other things that come up in the current environment. But give people time to do that and give them the support to do that.
And Mike, if we take this concept of production levels or production staff being down maybe 20-25%, which obviously will have an impact on the overall output of a particular facility. Do you have a sort of like a helicopter view as to what's happening in the larger industry in terms of the UK? Because we've also heard that some sheep plants are under pressure because they're not getting supply in time from their sheep feeders, for example. Do you think that there is now starting to be a sort of pressure squeeze in terms of capacities across the UK?
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's potentially exacerbated by the fact that in the UK we have a very dynamic market. There's a lot of choice, there's a lot of variety, there's a lot of fragmentation in terms of the product specifications that are out there. And certainly if things can be condensed or consolidated, then if there are less board grades to run, then sheep feeders, corrugators will obviously produce more. So that's one option, but it's convincing. The problem there, as always, is convincing the customer to take something slightly different, which is not always the easiest. And as I say, in the UK, we've got a very dynamic market, and people have been used now for a number of years of getting exactly what they want and things to be bespoke. And I think we're potentially going into an environment where some of that bespoke culture perhaps has to change a little, but I'm not sure how you lead that as the supplier, because in all these things you really need customers to lead things, to lead projects and lead requirements.
And Mike, coming back to the individual plants where you've been seeing cases of 20% reduction in the staff, that obviously leads on to some significant impact in terms of skill sets. Because if you lose your key die cutter operator or your key number one single facer operator, what sort of pressure is that putting on the plants where they're losing those primary skill sets?
If you're losing key individuals, I think in any organisation, whether it's a key manager, whether it's a key technical person, whether it's key operators, then clearly that has an impact on output. It potentially means that your availability to run equipment's not there. When you are running it, if you're using people who perhaps don't have the same level of skill or expertise, or are just trying to step up, because some people will do that. They'll see it as an opportunity to develop themselves, but it just adds extra pressure, and then there's the chances of more mistakes and more quality issues, etc. So again, where you've got that, it's about making sure that you're supporting your people, from my point of view, and letting them know that if you're doing your best, that's all you can expect. But I think the key thing is coming back to, if you're doing a critical path analysis of your operators and your staff and employees within the business, you've got an opportunity at the moment because I think COVID's going to be here till well into the spring. Can you do anything about that in terms of bringing in training or support or coaching for people? Not always easy, because if you're needing an OEM supplier to come in and do that, again, not always the easiest thing to do at short notice. In some of the bigger groups, can you pull resources? And to be fair, within some of the smaller operations, is that something that's worth discussing? There's a sheep plant association. If it's engineering skills and resources, is that something that potentially people could share? in terms of cost management, well, there are certainly avenues out there where people can look at shared utilisation of spares and things like that. And there are a couple of organisations that are already providing that as a service. I think in terms of people and training, I think with all things, COVID is giving us the dip that we're seeing. It's going to have the impact that it has, but like all things, it comes in cycles, and the successful businesses are the ones that are going to be able to have the courage to be prepared to invest in what they need, whether that's infrastructure, whether it's in their people, whether it's in taking the chance with regards to costs and not just taking people out of the business, because things will pick back up. With all cycles, there is the downturn and then there is the upturn. And when that upturn comes, inevitably those that have invested during this period now in their people and in their systems, then they will be the ones that benefit.
Mike, very interesting that you're talking there about systems and processes. There's been an awful lot of development from some of the leading OEMs. Obviously, a lot of them have had their arms forced during COVID. I know of certain manufacturers who managed to actually complete installations remotely by Google Glasses and sort of video conferencing, etc., and enabling the machinery to get going. Do you feel that this is a great opportunity for the equipment manufacturers to enhance their offering? This then obviously gives opportunity to the plant owners to say, well, and I know we're going to discuss this in our second podcast when we're looking at financing and investment, but do you think this is a good opportunity also for the plants to be looking at investing in the latest technology so that they can grow when we come out of the bottom end of this?
I think one of the opportunities that I think everybody's got as a manufacturer, I think if we look around, the world's changed, and I don't think it's ever going to go back to where it was. And the systems and processes in every walk of life are now changed. Now, I think that there is a real opportunity now within manufacturing to become more data driven in terms of processes, to have more automation. And some of that will come through investment in new capital equipment, but some of it can be through automation of your equipment in situ. And there are systems where we can put diagnostics into existing equipment. I mean, self-diagnostics on equipment is not something new. It's been around for decades. But in the way that data is now used, particularly with 4.0 and Industry 4.0, which a number of people now and suppliers are developing and developing well. I think the interface between the data, the systems, and the people that are managing it is improving all the time. So, yeah, I think that there's some real opportunity there. And that comes as well with all levels of investment and equipment utilization, whether it's through raw material purchasing, whether it's through spare parts provision, and whether it's through just people and developing your people. The use of data and data processes to support that and back that up is going to be ever more important. And I think within your business as well, looking at your processes, looking at your people, looking at processes, looking at the critical paths in those, looking at where you get the most value. So if you're doing a process map of your business, do a value map of your business. Where are you making the most money within your business? Let's focus on that. Within the markets that are evolving, clearly online purchases is increased. It's going to increase further. Some companies are already at the forefront of that. But in terms of e-commerce, what can you do? What can you develop within your business to strengthen your position in that area? And then in terms of communication, many managers and many teams are having to work remotely. We're doing this by Zoom, but many of us don't really have the facilities, be it at home or within the office network, to do it that effectively. and maybe they're areas where people need to just look at, because for a relatively modest investment, you can make sure that you've got a good remote working infrastructure within your business. One of the businesses I was speaking to in Leeds, they weren't in corrugated, but they were working. They've got 80 people in their office that they were looking to have to work remotely, and they just got standard fibre coming into their business that they typically like you would have at home at £40 a month, and it was just falling down. And we were trying to explain to them that if you put yourself a proper broadband system in here, then everybody can work effectively. They can work from home, they can work from the office, and for the price of your coffee machine, you've got a good system that's got integrity. Whereas, and as we explained, your coffee machine fails, you nip across the road to McDonald's or the little coffee hut on the corner. If your internet fails or your broadband fails, everybody goes home because you can't do your job, and that's lost revenue.
Yeah, because that's going to be, I think, a challenge moving forward, Mike, because a lot of businesses, particularly the small business, probably had not actually stress test to see whether they could run their entire operation remotely with just the manufacturing team on the shop floor. Is this something that you feel that particularly the smaller plants have been particularly weak at, in terms of looking at that communication platform? Because just sending stuff by email doesn't cut the mustard, does it?
No. Speaking to a number of SMEs and business owners around the country, I think one of the key problems for SMEs is that the business owner and the senior managers in that business are running around at 500 miles an hour. You know what it's like in your business at the moment. And it's getting the time to actually do the stress testing within the business, being able to take a step back, because they're in the here and now. They've got people phoning up every day, can't come into work, or they've been told by track and trace that they've got to self-isolate, or they can't get the products that they want because the supplier just doesn't have the capacity, or the plethora of problems that we all know are existing for business owners. And I suppose it's how do you find the time for them to just take that step back? And there are people out there that can help if people need help. But again, you've then got the problem of how do you get that support into your business, particularly if you're in a tier 3 area at the moment. And I know that we have key workers, etc., and the work environments are slightly different, but people are very reluctant then to be bringing people along into their business to try and help them. But it is a challenge for the business owners, it really is.
And Mike, we were talking just earlier about again, the loss of skill sets, and I think holistically, I'd just be interested to hear your thoughts in terms of where does the next generation come from? Because you look at the kids today. I mean, trying to sell to them a career in packaging is probably, it's an uphill struggle at best. Do you also feel though that the modern computer systems that will help us control the plants of the future, data management, autonomous learning equipment and machinery, do you think that's going to be good for the next generation who's used to sort of growing up on an iPad?
I think it's more interesting to the next generation, and your point made me chuckle. I remember at TRM Packaging we put a training program in, and we were going out to careers fairs, and up in the northwest you've got Bentley, you've got Jaguar Land Rover, you've got Rolls-Royce, British Aerospace, you name them. And we very quickly learned that the very last thing that they wanted to see on our trade stand was cardboard boxes or the fact that it was a factory. We ended up just putting pictures of the computer screens of our multicolour printers and etc. And then one of the trainees that we had that was helping lead it clicked onto the idea of let's get the stand next to the hospital and nursing and midwifery stand, because that's where a lot of the lads were congregating. I know it sounds a bit sexist, but a lot of the people were congregating around that area. But the key thing was, once we got people into the business to show them around, particularly with their parents, people were astonished. They thought, the usual comment was that this is like National Geographic or Discovery Channel. It's just absolutely amazing that product can come in on huge reels and leave in really quite high quality printed boxes without anybody ever touching it. And it is a challenge, but I've always been a strong advocate of getting good quality young people into your business, because they do so much to help you transform your business. They help your business internally. They just add so much. They're just like the ingredient in a fine meal.
There you go. Well, Mike, thank you so much indeed. It's been fascinating to chat to you today, looking at some of these impacts that COVID are having. As I said earlier in the podcast, we're going to be getting together again soon to have a look at plenty of other topics that are going to impact the independent market. We'll try and have a session on Brexit. We're going to have a look at investment within businesses, how to upscale your business and getting it ready for sale. So in the meantime, Mike, thanks ever so much indeed, and we'll look forward to catching up again next week.